They say your final moments bring clarity, like a flash of lightning that reveals everything you've ever been afraid to see. I used to think that meant I'd cling harder to my lifelong beliefs, that I'd feel comfort in my faith until my very last breath. But what actually happened was the exact opposite. My name is Yusuf Khan, and I'm 62 years old. I was once a respected Imam, sure of every verse I recited, every sermon I preached. Yet one harrowing moment changed everything I thought I knew about life, about faith, and most shockingly, about Jesus. I was born in a small village on the outskirts of Baghdad, Iraq. My family traced its lineage back to several generations of devout Imams. By the time I was 11, people were already commenting on my ability to memorize and recite the Quran with a passion beyond my years. My grandfather, who guided my earliest steps in faith, always said, "Yusuf, your heart is drawn to Allah's words. One day, you will lead many." Years later, when I assumed the role of Imam in my local mosque, I felt I was fulfilling that prophecy. Prayer calls, community gatherings, and fervent discussions about Islamic teachings filled my days. Truth be told, I never thought I would leave Iraq. But life has a way of pulling us where we least expect to go. Political turmoil forced me and my wife Fatima to make a decision no one in our family ever dreamed of. We packed up whatever could fit in 2 suitcases and fled to the United States. It wasn't an easy transition. I remember stepping off the plane, a hum of English words swirling around my ears. Everything felt so foreign. The people, the smells, the tall buildings, even the color of the sky seemed different. A small local Muslim community welcomed us. I became their imam in a modest mosque that occupied an old storefront. The sign outside was faded, but the space inside resonated with life and faith. Every Friday, the rows filled with people who had traveled from all over the Middle East, South Asia, and Africa, seeking the same solace we did. Their trust in me was humbling. I gave sermons, counseled couples, guided teenagers through identity crises, and organized community events. I believed with all my heart that Allah had placed me here to share His message. Fast forward to when I turned 62. Life had settled into a predictable rhythm. My children, 2 boys and a girl, were starting families of their own. I considered myself blessed beyond measure. But a sudden diagnosis shattered my illusion of security. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctor's words blurred in my mind. "We'll do what we can, Mr. Khan, but the prognosis isn't good." Chemotherapy was the primary option, but the odds it would extend my life were slim. Friends, family, and the congregation rallied around me. They reminded me that we are tested by adversity, much like how the Prophet Ibrahim was tested with the command to sacrifice his son. This trial, I told myself, was my test of faith. I approached chemotherapy with unwavering commitment to my prayers. Even as the chemicals coursed through my veins, draining my strength, I whispered verses from the Quran. "Ya Allah, if this is my time, let me meet you in peace." I prayed night after night. Strangely, even with such a dire diagnosis, I had a serene confidence that my faith would see me through. But sometimes, life has a way of giving answers you never see coming. One evening, after an especially brutal chemo session, I felt an aching tightness in my chest. At first I shrugged it off, chalking it up to side effects, but it grew worse by the minute, like a massive weight pressing down on my rib cage. My vision blurred, and sounds around me dulled. I barely remember the frantic rush to the hospital. The next thing I knew, I was looking down at my own body from above. Yes, from above, as if I had floated right out of myself. Doctors, nurses, and beeping machines surrounded my body. I saw them scrambling, heard them shout my name, and felt an unworldly calm washing over me. Is this death? I wondered. Shouldn't my consciousness have just stopped? Then I noticed a light forming at the edge of my vision, warm and compelling, like a gentle invitation. It wasn't blinding. Instead, it felt alive, with a calm energy. As I drew closer, I heard echoes of my life. My mother's lullabies, my father's evening prayers, verses of the Quran I'd recited 1,000 times. The light enveloped me, and for a fleeting moment, I thought, this must be paradise. The joy I felt in that instant defied words. Relief, peace, and gratitude swirled within me. All praise belongs to Allah, I whispered. But just as quickly as that serenity embraced me, it was torn away. The beautiful surroundings began to decay before my eyes. Green leaves shriveled into black husks, fruits rotted and dropped to the ground, emitting a rancid stench. Darkness swallowed the light, and in the pitch-black void, tormented cries and screams echoed. Out of the cacophony, one voice tore at my soul. My mother, begging for mercy. My heart felt like it might split. I couldn't see her, but her agony was unmistakable. I tried to move, to help, but I was frozen, weightless, yet trapped in an endless dark. Fear blossomed into terror. Suddenly, a commanding voice thundered through the void. Yusuf, everything will now be revealed. Far off in the distance stood a towering throne, imposing in its majesty. A figure sat upon it, and as I drifted closer, my knees gave out. The Prophet Muhammad. I recognized him instantly. But he was bound in chains, sorrow etched into his face. The shock was indescribable. Why would the Prophet be in chains? My mind fought for answers. This must be some sort of grotesque illusion. The Prophet's eyes locked onto mine, and tears streamed down his cheeks. It felt as though the entire universe was weeping. I tried to speak, to argue that I was a devout Imam, but a deep voice emerged, rolling through the void like thunder. The time has come for you to know the truth, Yusuf. A massive book plummeted from the darkness, crashing onto what appeared to be a floor of swirling shadows. It shook the very air around me. I knew this book, the Quran. Its pages flipped as if guided by an invisible hand. That same voice resonated again, each word like an earthquake in my mind. Who is Allah, Yusuf? Have you ever truly asked yourself this question? My immediate thought was, how dare I question who Allah is? He is the Creator, the most merciful. But the voice pressed on. How do you know He is the Creator? Have you ever truly examined the origins of your faith? Before I could protest, images leaped from the Quran's pages, forming living scenes in the darkness. The first was the Kaaba, surrounded by idols. I could see people bowing before figures carved from wood and stone. The voice announced, "This is the Kaaba before Islam. Where was Allah among these gods?" I felt a disorienting sense of disbelief. We've always labeled that era as the age of ignorance, I thought. But these images are real. My head spun, the scene shifted, showing an ancient civilization revering a massive idol, inscribed with a name resembling Baal. Beside it, in a script that looked eerily like Old Arabic, was another name, El. The voice whispered, Baal, El, Allah. Have you considered the connection? My heart pounded. Was everything I believed built on a misunderstanding of older traditions? Have I been deceived? I choked out, my voice shaking. In an instant, I was pulled away from this realm. I awoke in the hospital, gasping for air, drenched in sweat. Nurses and doctors crowded around me, relief plain on their faces. One of them said, "You're back, Mr. Khan," and I felt anything but relieved. My mind raced with the echoes of that voice. My physical heart was beating again, but my spiritual core was in upheaval. In the following days, I couldn't escape the questions that haunted me. Every moment of solitude turned into a replay of those visions. The decaying paradise, my mother's cries, the chained prophet, and the relentless voice demanding I reconsider the nature of Allah. I knew I couldn't just go back to my old life and pretend nothing had happened. But how could I share this with my wife? Fatima had been my unwavering rock. Together, we had navigated war, displacement, and cultural upheaval. If I told her that everything we built our life upon was now under question, would she stand by me, or would she think I'd lost my mind? Weeks turned into months. My congregation noticed I was withdrawing. I stopped delivering sermons, citing health issues. People assumed it was the cancer treatments making me weak, and I let them believe that. Meanwhile, I spent countless hours in my study. My once familiar Arabic texts now looked strange to me, like they carried hidden meanings I'd never noticed. I ventured into reading materials about pre-Islamic traditions, the development of monotheistic beliefs in the Middle East, and historical critiques of the Quran's origins. It felt like peering over a dangerous cliff, breathtaking and terrifying at the same time. I remembered how I used to dismiss such discussions as the whispers of shaitan. But now, I found myself devouring every piece of information I could find, searching for answers. Fatima watched me in silence. She would bring me tea and linger at the doorway, her eyes full of concern. Sometimes late at night, I would catch her wiping away tears. We had faced all challenges together. Why was I now shutting her out? But I was paralyzed by the fear that if I voiced my doubts, I'd betray not just my community, but my family heritage. An unexpected source of comfort came from Dr. Thompson, my oncologist. She wasn't Muslim, she was Christian as far as I could tell, but she had a gentle way of speaking that reminded me of the best teachers I'd ever known. She'd seen so many patients confront mortality, and in that vulnerability, she recognized something in me. One afternoon, after reviewing my latest test results, she said in a soft voice, "Youssef, I can see you're battling more than just cancer. If you ever need an ear, I'm here." I hesitated, but over time, our doctor-patient relationship grew into a respectful friendship. She told me about her own upbringing in a strict Christian home, and how she wrestled with the seeming contradictions between faith and science. She admitted she never fully abandoned her faith. She found a way to integrate questioning with belief. God gave us minds to inquire, not just to obey, she said. And something about that statement felt oddly reassuring. Around that same time, a young Muslim resident recognized me from the mosque. He found me sitting alone in the hospital chapel. I was embarrassed, but instead of judging me, he shared his own struggles, trying to reconcile medical science with certain traditional interpretations of Islamic doctrine. "I want to be a good Muslim and a good doctor," he said, "but I don't always know how." He didn't offer me any grand spiritual revelation, but his honesty was like a lifeline. For the first time in weeks, I felt less isolated. Late one night, I was back home, pacing the garden. The stars above me were impossibly bright. My father used to say that the night sky is a testimony to Allah's greatness. But now, under those same stars, I found myself whispering, "God, if you are truly there, show me the truth, even if it isn't what I expect." My breath caught as I said the words. It felt like the first time in my life I'd allowed genuine doubt to meet genuine hope. A couple of days later, A chaplain named Father John stopped by my hospital room. I had never seen him before, and I assumed he was just another staff member checking in on patients. He wore a simple white collar and carried a small Bible. In a gentle tone, he said, "I heard you had a near-death experience. Would you be open to talking about it?" Normally, I would have declined. A desperation overpowered my reservations. I told him everything. The out-of-body moment, the chained prophet, the voice that rattled my soul. Tears slipped down my cheeks as I spoke, feeling both shame and relief. Father John listened, without a hint of judgment, his expression a compassionate mixture of sadness and understanding. After I finished, he asked softly, "Did you see Jesus?" The question startled me. In my vision, I hadn't. I shook my head. Then Father John opened his Bible. He read John 14:6. "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." I'd heard this verse cited in countless debates, but it had never struck me as personally relevant. This time, though, the words echoed like a distant thunder in my heart. From that day forward, I wrestled with a new question. Could Jesus be the real key to what I experienced? Every day, I returned to the memories of that bright light, the decaying paradise, the voice questioning the foundation of my faith. And always, I came back to Jesus' words. "No one comes to the Father except through me." I started reading bits of the Bible. Secretly, of course. No one in my community could know. But the more I read, the more I found teachings about love, forgiveness, and a personal connection to God that felt different from anything I had encountered before. In the Quran, there were references to Jesus as a prophet. But in these biblical texts, he was so much more. Savior, Redeemer, the living embodiment of divine grace. Meanwhile, the tension with my congregation grew. Some members suspected I was losing faith. I received worried phone calls, even visits to my home, urging me to focus on prayer and to remember my duties as an imam. One elderly man I deeply respected said, "Sheikh Youssef, the community needs you now more than ever. Don't let your illness lead you astray." Inside, I felt torn. I could no longer give them the certainty they craved because I didn't have it myself. Each attempt to return to leading prayers was overshadowed by the haunting memory of my near-death encounter. How could I stand before them and preach what I was no longer sure I believed? My internal conflict reached a breaking point one morning when I was reading the Bible in the hospital chapel. I came across the story of the prodigal son, how he squandered everything, only to return home and find unconditional love awaiting him. Something in me broke. I realized I was that prodigal, wandering far from what could be true. Tears filled my eyes, and I prayed in a way I never had before. "Jesus, if you are real, please show me." A warmth washed over me, reminiscent of the light in my near-death experience, yet calmer and more hopeful. It wasn't a dramatic vision. No angels singing, no voice booming from heaven. Just an overwhelming sense that I was deeply known and loved. Despite my doubts, despite the confusion. I found Father John later that day and told him, "I believe in Jesus, but I'm scared." He smiled gently. "Faith often involves courage, Youssef," he said. We talked for hours about the meaning of baptism, dying to an old life and rising to a new one, just as Jesus died and rose again. I agonized over how my family and community would react, but the pull in my heart was too strong to ignore. A week later, in a small side room of Father John's church, I was baptized. The simple act of water flowing over my head felt like a release from the bondage of fear and doubt. I can't describe it better than to say I experienced a sense of peace and belonging that I'd never known before. "You are free, my brother," Father John whispered. And for the first time, in what felt like forever, I believed it.